Hello and welcome to People on Earth. I am Makana Kanyakupanda. Wetlands are ecologically sensitive areas. To help me unpack this topic, in the studio I have Programs Manager, Harare Wetlands Trust, Mr. Celestino Chari, and Julia Peireni, CEO of BirdLife Zimbabwe. Welcome to the program.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's just get straight into it. People from home, they just hear this word wetlands. What is a wetland?
So the ecology of wetland is defined by water. So it's either surface water, such as we are used to seeing lakes and rivers and dams, or it's underground water. And typically the water is very close to the surface. It's either seasonal wetlands or permanent wetlands. In Harare, our wetlands are seasonal. They are grassland wetlands, so often they are covered by grass. So the intact wetlands are covered by grass, and the water is on the surface during the rainy season up until June possibly, and in some areas further into the year. But the underground water is close to the surface. So if you dig underground, you will see the water. So they are sponges. So basically they are keeping the rivers, the drainage lines, with water throughout the year through the dry season. So the function is to regulate, the primary function, regulate water.
Okay, so having said that, what are the characteristics of a wetland?
So in Harare, often, the characteristic will be peaty soil, so marsh, grasslands, peaty soil, spongy-like, very difficult to walk on. So we've all had experiences. Those of us living in Harare will know exactly what it likes to walk on wetland. So very spongy, but not all the areas are peaty soil. There's also sandy soils, like the Mavuko area will be more sandy. So the characteristics remain the same as water, and the function of that primary function is that of regulating water flow. One of the things I need to mention that of prime importance on wetlands is the biodiversity of wetlands. So that helps in the regulation of water, stopping the movement of soil, so they prevent siltation, bringing in the soil, the water from underground, from the rain, when it rains, so it pulls the water into the ground. The different species of plants pull the water underground, and the replenishment of underground water supplies, which is really very important. And also what it does is purification. So this pulling of water through the ground is a purification process. So
Okay.
the plants are also very important for the purification process.
Okay, so I was about to ask you the benefits of a wetland to both communities and the maintenance of natural ecosystems.
Yeah, so wetlands in Harare, but all over the country, are critically important natural infrastructure. So, the natural infrastructure needs to be included in the economic development of the city because it's providing ecosystem services. So the wetlands and the biodiversity on the wetlands, and that's something that many people don't understand. When we talk about protection of wetlands, we can say, oh, well, we'll protect our wetlands, but we can also build on top of them. We can also cultivate on top of them, but we cannot. Because what does that do? It removes the biodiversity. So what is biodiversity? It's the different types of life forms. So typically we are doing a lot of monitoring of wetlands in Harare, so typically you'll have over 200 species of plant species on a wetland. So they will all be doing different functions. As with the motor of your vehicle, you have different components of your motor, they all do different functions. So if you take out your alternator from your motor, what's going to happen? Something is not going to happen. You start a motor, you take it out, perhaps the motor won't start. So this is the importance of biodiversity on wetlands, and together there's this functioning ecosystem. So we call the biodiversity and the wetlands together natural ecosystem. So this is the natural infrastructure, provides water. So the primary function, Harare is situated on upstream, you know, where the headwater wetlands, where the streams begin. So we have the catchment areas of the Manyame, so including the Marimba and the Mukovisi rivers. It includes the, you know, the Gwibi catchment area. So where those streams begin, the drainages, and they all go downstream into our catchment dams. So it's really important to protect anything that's happening on the headwater wetlands, you know, upstream, which is Harare. Anything affecting those wetlands will affect, you know, clean water supply in the catchment dams below.
Okay, Mr. Chari, would you want to add, what are the benefits of a wetland?
Yeah, so Julia has already mentioned what we have is that we have got natural infrastructure system that we have, not like the Norton Jeffrey that we have, where it's artificially built. So if you look at 20 years ago, you will find our water was very clean and it was very cheap to access to the communities and all that. But as currently as we speak, because we have destroyed most of our wetlands, there's a lot of pollution going on into Lake Chuero, into our streams and all that. And you find because of that level of pollution in our water sources like Lake Chuero and Dawando, City of Harare is using an average between 8 and 10 chemicals to clean our water. But 20 years ago, it was not the case because our wetlands will play the role of the purification, the storage and all that. When, you know, after the rains, then they will discharge the water into these streams and the water will reach our source as clean as it is. But now our water is very expensive because we are destroying our natural infrastructure.
Okay, so let's talk about the Ramsar Convention, Julia. Tell me why this is important for us as a country on the maintenance of wetlands, the Ramsar Convention.
So the Ramsar Convention is an international convention. It was first formulated by the international community in 1971 in Ramsar in Iran. So it's very, very important because at that time, at a global level, we acknowledged the importance and the fragility of water sources and wetlands. And we recognized that water is a finite product. So all our development, you know, hinges on the availability of water.
Okay, so I'll come back to you. We'll be taking a short break. We are taking a short break. We will come back soon. Do stay with us. Welcome back on People on Earth. We are discussing about wetlands today. So Julia, you were talking about the Ramsar Convention and its importance. You can tell the people at home the importance of the Ramsar Convention.
So the Ramsar Convention is an acknowledgement at a global level that wetlands are important and that we need to prioritize their preservation for the sustainability of humanity on this planet. And so as Zimbabwe, we are signatories to the Ramsar Convention. We have 7 Ramsar sites in Zimbabwe, and they are critically important that so at an international level and at a national level, we have recognized their importance.
Okay, so you are talking about the 7 sites.
Yes.
Can you name them?
Yes, so in Harare itself, we have 4. So we have the Monavale Ramsar site, we have the Cleveland Dam Ramsar site, then we have the Lake Chivero and Manyame are also Ramsar sites. So within the context of Harare metropolitan area and slightly beyond, you know, we have a wetland city. And then we have Chinhoyi Caves, which is a Ramsar site. We have Mana Pools, which is a Ramsar site. We have Victoria Falls, which are a Ramsar site. Yeah, so very, very important sites. Can I mention also that these are not the only important sites that should be nominated as Ramsar sites.
Okay, sure. So, Mr. Chari, let's talk about the distribution of wetlands in Harare. What's the overview?
Generally, I'll talk on the negative side of it. I can actually confess that we have lost 50% of our wetlands in Harare as we speak to develop housing developments, you know, urban cultivation. I think it's all over in Harare, and it has got serious implications in terms of how the wetlands are functioning. So 50% we have lost. And I think it can even be more because we have not recorded the recent invasions that has happened. So we may be at 60, we may be at 65, but not verified. But definitely we are above 50 in terms of the wetlands that we have lost.
Okay, so having said that, what is your organization doing in terms of raising awareness?
Yeah, so what we have as an organization is that we have created a network of community-based groups, I think in 10 areas. We look at examples, Mabuku, Zewarasekwa, Glenview, Kampuzuma, and Mfakos, all those areas. They're actually groups that that advocates for the protection of the wetlands in their areas that they are living in. So we've got that kind of setup with the community-based groups. Then we also have a movement with residents. There are many residents associations that are quite involved in the protection of wetlands. And I think Cosmo, which are in charge of the Monofo wetland, I think you have heard about that. It's one of our examples that it's all being, effort that is coming from residents coming together to try to protect their wetlands. Besides the residents also, there are also individuals and experts that are also interested in terms of, the functions of the wetlands, be it planners, be scientists, GIS people and all that. So it's a whole issue of, much advocacy in terms of protection of wetlands in Harare. That's exactly what we have. Okay,
so your organization has embarked on a number of awareness activities on wetlands protection and conservative. Can you elaborate on some of the success stories done by the Wetlands Trust, especially when taking into account that there is a close link between climate change and wetlands?
Yeah, so I'll give, there are many examples that I'll give. Okay, we also embarked, we are also involved in issues of litigation. We have got about over 25 cases that are under litigation, where we are trying to rectify the wrong, wetlands invasions, EIs that have been given, and procedurally, development permits and all those in wetlands. And our success rate has not been good, but of course 50-50, because, when we look at these litigation cases, they take quite a lot of time, and it's time consuming, it's expensive and all that. But we had successes in terms of certain areas. Monavo, we managed to stop things there. I know in Eastleigh, it's good examples that I can give. So litigation is one of the issues that we are embarking on. But as I said, it's very expensive and it's not sustainable. So what is important is for the legislation to be implemented in a transparent and manner, where then the legislation has to take its course to make sure that things are in order.
Okay, so having said that, let me come to you, Julia. What is the role of civic societies in the wetlands management and preservation?
The importance of civil society, the communities, residents becoming involved in such a important issue is paramount. I cannot express how important it is for people to become involved, because this, wetlands are our lives. And so what we are seeing that in our local authorities and government agencies, often there is a process of working in silos. So the environment is considered something perhaps for the tourists, but unfortunately the environment is a very cross-cutting issue. So you see that, the Ministry of Environment will not be talking to the Ministry of Lands, or possibly they won't be talking to the Ministry of Mines. So, and everybody's using environments and using wetlands. So people on the ground are the ones that pay the price, for degradation that takes place. So this is why in areas such as Buririro, where houses are being allowed to be developed on the wetlands, these houses flood every time it rains. In the rainy season, and this is why government has become involved and said, we need to produce a wetland master plan, which they did, wetland guidelines, wetland policy. So these are the tools that have been, implemented, and we have worked closely also with government and other organizations for this to happen, and through our advocacy work. But people need to be involved, because it's not stopping the devastation of wetlands. So the fight goes on, and people must be involved because we are all directly involved. So the management of wetlands needs to be, the communities and residents need to be involved in the management of wetlands.
Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are talking about wetlands today on People on Earth. We shall be taking a short break. Do stay with us. Welcome back to People on Earth. We are discussing the issue of wetlands. And now, Mr. Chari, we want to talk about legislation on wetlands protection. In your view, as a country, do we have a appealing form of legislation that speaks to the protection of wetlands in Zimbabwe?
Yeah, on paper, we are fairly good as Zimbabwe in terms of legislation pertaining to wetlands. I think you are aware that we have got a policy on wetlands. We also have guidelines on the protection of wetlands. We also have the Environmental Management Act, which really looks at the protection of wetlands. It's clearly articulated in the legislation on what is supposed to be done. Then you also have other small sisters of legislation that we have, the Water Act, the Regional Town Planning Act that touches on the issues of legislation. And we also have the recently gazetted SI on ecosystem management. But the biggest problem that we have is the implementation of those laws by the responsible authorities. And these vary for certain reasons, political, issues of lack of transparency, corruption, and people who try by all means to find loopholes within this legislation to benefit themselves or to push certain agendas. That's where we have a problem in terms. So in terms of legislation, we've got quite good legislation on paper, if well implemented and coordinated. Because one of the issues that really lacks on our legislation is the coordination aspects of the different pieces of legislation that we currently have. What is the local government doing, the Minister of Environment, the agents, the local authorities and all that. There's no cohesion in terms of implementation of these laws. Everyone is doing their own jobs. So you find that there's a big gap and people take advantage of those loopholes.
And Julia, what do you think is lacking as well in terms of the implementation of the legislation?
Well, I want to mention that, going back to the Ramsar Convention, that the Ramsar Convention has not been domesticated in Zimbabwe, which means that it's not in our domestic laws. So it needs to be mainstreamed into our laws, and this has not happened. Yes, we have a policy, yes, we have a guidelines, yes, we have a wetland master plan, and now we have an ecologically sensitive area map, but this is not domestication. We also have in our constitution a very progressive constitution which gives us the right to a safe and healthy environment, which is very, very progressive. And just last year, the United Nations passed a resolution recognizing the right of humanity to a safe and healthy environment. So we can see how critical that is. And what does that mean in terms of wetlands? It means to live in an environment that you're not going to get cholera, you're not going to get typhoid. These are all, symptoms of wetland degradation. So, and if you look in the, Environmental Management Act, that where are those loopholes? One of the loopholes that often are used for the development of wetlands is the environmental impact assessment process. It is totally flawed. Totally. It needs to be revised. And the reason for that is because developers pay consultants to develop environmental impact assessments, which they are then submitted to EMA. Often these documents are substandard. They do not speak to the importance of wetlands. Often they don't even recognize that the areas that are being developed are wetlands. And we know this because we do independent surveys of many of these EIAs. And then the consultants themselves are, don't have, often they are not at a level of understanding of wetlands, of the environment in general.
Okay,
so this is a very, very big, and we are seeing it all over the country.
Okay, so you were talking about land developers, right?
Yes.
And we see that in Harare, there is a lot of invasion of land by
Yes.
land barons,
Yes.
probably due to the lack of awareness. What would be your message to them?
It's a planning issue. So, you know, it's the hierarchy of land ownership is that there's state land, then there's the private land, then there's the local authority land. And you find there's no one who will just come into a place and do whatever they are doing without following a certain procedure, although it's unprocedural. So local authorities are also allocating land in wetlands. That's a fact. State is also doing the same. Then those people with private ownership are also coming to say, but we've got ownership, I've got a lease, I've got my deed, and I've got a right to develop. So it becomes an environmental right versus property rights issue. And that becomes a very difficult issue because everyone has got a right to shelter. So that's where the issue. So yes, definitely you have some land barons who are coming in from nowhere. I know places like Buliriro, Sivarasekwa, you've got that, but those ones are very easy to take away because council should just go in and say, you're invading our land. The state should also say you're invading even the private owners. So it's very easy to remove them. But then there is the friend behind, which is corruption, lack of transparency, like what I've said, lack of stakeholder consultations from communities and all that. Whom are you planning for when you don't consult your own community? It means you're doing something wrong. Plan for the community so that they also benefit from what you're doing.
Okay, so having said that, you're talking about corruption and everything. How best can this be resolved?
It's a governance issue that needs a lot of intervention at a very high level. Remember, I talked about the coordination aspect, the gaps that will be created when there's no coordination, there's no transparency. So it's a governance issues where we need to revisit our laws, look at the loopholes, try to amend them so that they suit the current situation that we have. The population density, shortage of land and all that. And, people who are living in wetlands, the private owners, why can't government come up with a compensation fund or a compensation framework so that people can be compensated and be moved to other places so that we protect our wetlands?
How can people at home access information about the preservation of wetlands and generally what we are talking about?
Yeah, so with the Harare Wetlands Trust, we are on Facebook and on Twitter. We are also, as BirdLife Zimbabwe, our offices are on Eastleigh, and so they can easily be contacted in the communities. The most important thing in the community is to reach out to the community-based organizations that are already working with wetlands, in wetlands, and to strengthen them. So this is really important process to get involved locally and to work together in this. So we are easily reachable. So if you Google us, you will find us. So Google Harare Wetlands Trust and Google BirdLife Zimbabwe and you will find us.
Okay, thank you very much for
Thank
coming.
you.
Thank you very much for sharing with us. Thank you very much for watching People on Earth. I am Makanaka Nyakupanda. We were talking about wetlands. I hope you have learned a lot and do preserve our wetlands. Until next time, do stay safe.